What makes a riff legendary? What makes it rewrite history? This isn't just about heavy chords or killer hooks. This is about 10 seismic riffs that didn't just make great songs. They redefined heavy metal itself. We're diving into the blueprint of metal. 10 tracks that reshaped its sound, its soul, and its future. From the dark birth of doom to the chaotic precision of djent, these riffs are turning points that changed the game forever. Buckle up. Let's unveil the riff revolution. Black Sabbath, 1970. The birth of doom. It starts with a haunting tritone, the Devil's Interval, C and F sharp. This wasn't just another riff. It murdered blues rock and summoned something darker, heavier, more sinister than anyone had heard before. Tony Iommi's sluggish, menacing guitar tone turned music into a seance, a sonic exorcism that terrified the establishment. But this riff wasn't only about shock value. In an era of psychedelic optimism and peace and love, it sounded like The Hangover, the creeping anxiety of a world unraveling under Vietnam, political unrest, and cultural disillusionment. By embracing dissonance, atmosphere, and grinding slow tempo, Black Sabbath showed that heaviness comes not from speed, but from darkness itself. Tony Iommi's sound was born from tragedy. After losing 2 fingertips in a factory accident, he crafted lighter strings and lower tunings. That limitation became liberation, giving birth to the very heaviness that defined metal. This tritone riff didn't just make history. It became the DNA of metal's dark, rebellious identity, a form of mass cultural therapy that gave voice to collective fear. It was the unholy spark that ignited doom metal and inspired generations, from Metallica to Candlemass, and every heavy band that followed. Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water, 1972. The universal language. 4 notes. That's all Ritchie Blackmore needed to write the most recognizable riff in music history. Played in diatonic fourths, it's simple, powerful, and undeniable. This riff wasn't just a hit, it was a gateway. Its raw, bluesy crunch bridged hard rock and proto-metal, inspiring countless guitarists to pick up an axe. From bars to arenas, its global success made heavy riffs a commercial force, paving the way for metal's mainstream rise. But its genius wasn't only in its sound, it was in its accessibility. Blackmore, a virtuoso, deliberately crafted a riff so elemental and perfectly structured that even a beginner could play it. This didn't dilute metal, it built its army. By putting the world's most famous riff within reach of every kid with a cheap guitar, Smoke on the Water created a global community of players. This riff is also reportage, written about the night the Montreux Casino burned down after a fan fired a flare gun during a Frank Zappa show. Its history etched into sound, turning disaster into one of music's most enduring anthems. This riff proved that simplicity could conquer the world, shaping the riff-centric DNA of metal, while ensuring its future would rise from the ground up, not just from the gods on stage. Judas Priest, Breaking the Law, 1980. The Metal Manifesto. Sharp, galloping, and in your face, Glenn Tipton and KK Downing's riff is a battle cry. Backed by Rob Halford's defiant vocals, it was metal saying, "We're here to dominate." By stripping away blues influences and replacing them with pure power chord precision, Priest created the anthem riff of the new wave of British heavy metal. Its raw accessibility inspired Saxon, Def Leppard, and an entire generation to follow, pushing metal from dark clubs into massive arenas. But Breaking the Law wasn't just sound, it was identity. Where Motorhead reveled in chaos, Priest perfected discipline. The riff was the sound of orderly rebellion, sharp, modern, calculated. It reflected the clean edges of post-punk and new wave, but redirected them into pure metallic force. This was the moment metal shed its biker bar roots and became something sleek, unified, and global, an army in leather and studs. And it wasn't just about sound. Rob Halford's leather and studs aesthetic, borrowed from biker culture, gave metal its uniform. Breaking the Law wasn't just a riff, it was the soundtrack to a look, a lifestyle, a worldwide brotherhood. This riff didn't just define NWOBHM's sound, it redefined what metal looked like and how it would march across the world. Motorhead, Ace of Spades, 1980. The Speed Demon, Lemmy didn't just play loud, he weaponized sound. By fusing punk's reckless speed with metal's crushing power, Ace of Spades came roaring out like chaos at 100 miles an hour. The overdriven bass and relentless riffing weren't just noise. They were the missing link between NWOBHM's melody and the ferocity that would become thrash. It lit the fuse for Metallica, Slayer, and an entire generation of speed-obsessed bands, turning metal into pure adrenaline. But this riff carried more than velocity. It carried truth. Lemmy welded punk's nihilism to metal's muscle, and in doing so, created metal's enduring cult of the real. He wasn't playing a role, he was the genuine article. Ace of Spades rejected polish in favor of raw authenticity, proving that attitude mattered more than perfection. This wasn't just a song, it was a manifesto. Motorhead gave metal not only its speed, but its moral compass. Heavy music must always keep it real. Lemmy himself insisted, "We're not metal, we're rock and roll." But that denial only sharpened the truth. Motorhead created the DNA for thrash and speed metal. By refusing the label, they ended up defining it. Iron Maiden, The Number of the Beast, 1982. The Galloping Apocalypse. That signature galloping rhythm didn't just run. It stampeded across the globe, transforming heavy metal into an epic, theatrical force. With Steve Harris's thunderous bass, harmonized guitar riffs, and Bruce Dickinson's soaring vocals, Iron Maiden perfected the art of turning riffs into stories. This wasn't just NWOBHM. It was the blueprint for power metal, inspiring Helloween, Blind Guardian, and countless others to marry melody, drama, and virtuosity. But the deeper impact of The Number of the Beast was making metal literary. This riff didn't just make you headbang, it made you visualize. By narrating vivid, almost novelistic tales through rhythm and riff, Maiden turned songs into chapters, opening the door for epic poetry, historical sagas, and sprawling concept albums. Metal was no longer just rebellion. It became a grand narrative art form. Iron Maiden proved that heavy music could be as immersive as any opera or novel, only louder, faster, and infinitely heavier. But controversy only amplified its power. In America, religious groups staged protests, calling the band satanic. Instead of killing the record, the outrage turned it into forbidden fruit, fueling Maiden's rise from cult heroes to metal's biggest global act. With Maiden, the riff wasn't just music, it was theater. The stage shows, the mascot Eddie, the galloping riffs. Together, they pulled heavy metal out of clubs and planted it triumphantly in stadiums across the world. Metallica, Master of Puppets, 1986. The thrash masterpiece. James Hetfield's right hand became a weapon of mass destruction. This wasn't just downpicking, it was precision annihilation, driving an 8-minute epic packed with shifting riffs and crushing momentum. But Master of Puppets was more than just a thrash anthem, it was architecture. Each riff wasn't a moment, it was a building block, meticulously placed to form a towering cityscape of sound. The song proved that metal could have the structural complexity of classical music without losing a shred of aggression. Verses, bridges, and instrumental passages weren't just stitched together, they evolved, creating a narrative told entirely through the language of the riff. This was thrash as symphony, where brutality and sophistication coexisted in perfect balance. From Megadeth to Dream Theater, generations of bands chased this model, rethinking songs as multi-movement epics rather than simple verse-chorus frameworks. With Master of Puppets, Metallica didn't just dominate thrash, they rewrote the blueprint for metal composition itself. Its impact was so profound that Master of Puppets became the first metal album preserved in the US Library of Congress. Not just a thrash classic, but a recognized cultural artifact, metal elevated to high art. It was also the last album to feature bassist Cliff Burton. His classical sensibility and fearless experimentation shaped its complexity. His tragic death later that year froze Master of Puppets in time, not just as Metallica's peak, but as a sacred monument of thrash itself. Slayer, Raining Blood, 1986. The Gates of Hell. The genius of Raining Blood is that it doesn't give you room to breathe. The chromatic riff feels less like music and more like an assault. Sharp, jagged notes cutting through at breakneck speed. It sounded alien in 1986, almost unplayable, and that's why it worked. Slayer weren't writing songs anymore, they were writing weapons. This track crystallized the ethos of extremity. Death metal bands would take its speed and turn it into guttural brutality. Black metal bands would seize its dissonance and transform it into ritualistic chaos. From Florida to Norway, every extreme scene carries the DNA of this riff. Raining Blood isn't just iconic, it's elemental. It is the moment heavy music crossed from rebellion into pure sonic violence. Slayer didn't just play faster and darker. They created the blueprint of terror that extreme metal still follows nearly 4 decades later. The violence was so palpable that MTV restricted its airplay. But censorship only made the legend grow. Raining Blood became forbidden fruit, proof that extremity itself could be a selling point. And then there's the outro. One sustained, sliding chord that feels like the gates of hell grinding open. Minimal, brutal, unforgettable. It proved that sometimes the scariest sound in metal isn't speed, but silence stretched to infinity. Pantera, Walk, 1992. The Groove Revolution. Dimebag Darrell took thrash's speed and crushed it into unstoppable groove. This riff doesn't run, it stomps, with mid-tempo syncopated swagger and that thick, scooped tone that lands like a sledgehammer to the spine. Unlike thrash, which lit up the nervous system, or doom, which haunted the psyche, Walk went straight for the body. Its primal syncopation bypasses thought and commands movement. But this wasn't just a riff, it was a survival strategy. In the early 90s, when grunge was threatening to bury metal and hip-hop was redefining rhythm as the language of youth culture, Pantera outgrooved everyone. They proved metal didn't need to assimilate. It could dominate by sheer rhythmic force. With Walk, Pantera didn't just save metal, they redefined it. This riff became the blueprint for groove metal, fueling bands like Machine Head and Lamb of God, and ensuring the genre remained brutal, relevant, and arena-sized in a decade that almost killed it. Dimebag's riff didn't just save metal, it crossed into culture. Walk became a stadium anthem, blasting through sports arenas and locker rooms worldwide. It was proof that one riff could transform from underground defiance into mass adrenaline. KoRn, Blind, 1994. The cultural game changer. Are you ready? That call wasn't just an intro, it was a warning. Monkey and Head's down-tuned 7-string riff crashed in like a sledgehammer, a grinding, syncopated groove that shattered metal's old rules. But unlike the external demons of Sabbath or Slayer, Blind turned the lens inward. That low-end rumble wasn't just heavy, it was the sound of depression, anxiety, and alienation made flesh. That heaviness came from new tools. Monkey and Head wielded Ibanez Universe 7-string guitars, a model created for Steve Vai. They transformed it from a shredder's experiment into the standard weapon of nu metal, reshaping the sound of an entire generation. This riff wasn't escapism, it was confrontation. The 7-string guitar gave KoRn access to a darker tonal vocabulary, one that mirrored the crushing weight of internal struggle. For the first time, heaviness meant vulnerability. It legitimized pain, confession, and trauma as central themes in metal, and that shift resonated with an entire generation. With Blind, KoRn didn't just birth nu metal, they redefined what metal could talk about. They made the inner war as heavy as any battlefield, influencing Slipknot, Deftones, and countless bands who would build on that blueprint of emotional brutality. And on stage, Jonathan Davis made it even stranger, opening with bagpipes before detonating into that 7-string riff. It was weird, unsettling, unforgettable. That intro alone announced, this was a different kind of heavy, and a different kind of truth. Meshuggah, Bleed, 2008. The Mathematical Apocalypse. Frederick Thorndahl's 8-string riff in Bleed doesn't just play, it convulses, layered over polyrhythms that feel like they shouldn't even fit together, yet lock into terrifying precision. It's chaos, engineered into a machine that roars. With its jazz-inspired timing and seismic tone, Meshuggah didn't just write a riff, they rewrote the physics of metal. Out of this came Gent, a new dialect of heaviness that inspired Periphery, Animals as leaders, and an entire generation of progressive metal bands. But the genius of Bleed is that the machine feels alive. Those polyrhythms don't pulse like a computer. They breathe, mutate, and swarm. This wasn't just technical showmanship. It was a sonic metaphor for the 21st century. The riff mirrors the internet's chaotic data flow, the hum of global systems, the overlapping rhythms of digital life. Meshuggah tapped into the sound of our technological reality, overwhelming, inhuman, yet strangely organic. With Bleed, metal didn't just push its technical limits. It found its voice for the modern world, proving that brutality could also be a philosophy, a reflection of existence in the digital age. Its difficulty was legendary. Even Meshuggah admitted it took months to master, and for years they struggled to play it live. Bleed wasn't just a riff, it was a gauntlet, a human versus machine test of endurance. These riffs aren't just notes on a guitar, they're monuments. 10 moments where music stopped playing it safe, where artists broke the rules and rewrote the future. Every riff is a battle cry, every song a manifesto. Together, they built the towering cathedral of heavy metal, brick by crushing brick, riff by legendary riff. And that's why metal will never die, because somewhere, right now, someone is pressing play on these songs for the very first time, and their world is about to change forever. If you felt that power, hit like, share this with your fellow metalheads, drop a comment with your favorite riff, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter in the story of heavy metal.